And we are back. um, your North Star stuff. I think I feel like we were talking about the three-way, but you've got like a setup, like a workbench. Do you dial in your stuff every time that you use it? Like, can you want to walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, like I'll take all my stuff off the site in buckets.
Yeah.
Um, just so like the odd time on a job I might need one size box, different trowel bar on multiple coats. So I'll kind of leave it in a bucket, sealed bucket overnight, and I don't have to go through the process of washing it. But whenever like a job's done, I'll bring everything home, wash it up. Either I got a pressure washer out back.
Hmm.
Even my kitchen sink is good for like some of the low duty stuff. But anyway, I'll wash it. Then yeah, I have a workbench there. So before I put it away, I'll usually kind of just make sure everything's still realigned. Nothing kind of came loose and make any adjustments as or try to at least.
Yeah.
When I'm done each time, or at the very least double check it before I pick it up for the next job. Um, but yeah, I got actually it's a sauna door from an old demo job, um, working renovations that I just kind of put some legs on, and that's my
Okay.
workbench.
Well, a solid door would be a good bench, though. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
it's a cedar, so it smells delicious.
Ooh. One of my first jobs, I worked at Turkstor Lumber in the back. And I can remember hating going to work, but loving that smell when you walked in of cedar.
Yeah,
It's and then later on in life, being a carpenter working with cedar, it's like, oh, it's just so wonderful.
nothing beats it.
Yeah, right. I always wondered with those multi-one boxes if like because it looks like they're just simple as can be, clip on and off. But if things ever got like loose, or probably not, right? It's just like a clip system that puts it in.
Yeah, it's like a cam lock thing. And yeah, once they're clipped in, I've never had any issues. Like I've even running it, like I've never had a time where like I bumped the box in the wrong way where one of the clips came loose. Like that's never happened. And so Stan from Tapered United,
Hmm.
I guess Concord was like an old tool manufacturer that used to make tools. And I think Mark, I could be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but from what I understand, Mark that now makes the current North Star tools, he ran Concord originally and then sold the patents to or the company to Tape Tech. Um,
Oh, okay.
Concord back in the day had interchangeable trowel bars. So I guess Stan had on display these like old, like 20-year-old flat boxes that had that very similar interchangeable trowel bar that you see now on the current North Star. So that's just kind of a little fun fact. So Concord is relevant to me because I found a Concord corner box on Marketplace. So I bought it for $100, and
No
it works.
way.
It works great.
I just saw an old, like really old, and Columbia angle box on Kijiji. And it was the same thing. It was like $150. And I looked at it for a minute and I was like, I should just fucking buy that just to have it.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, you know what I mean? Eventually I'm gonna make like a big table, do like a live edge with an epoxy running through it. But then I'm gonna need like shit to put on it. And I think of stuff like that. Like I've got the original three ways that were like that, like wet glue, like that corner bead used to be.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, Ice Feller said he was going to. He's got all the different steps of fibofuse as the way that it went. Like he was a part of it, kind of all the way through. So he was going to make up like a little plaque. I got like Cam's first off of his taper cap that was fucked, and like, you know what I mean, just like fun stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, like old tools, that'd be super cool. um when Kayla was down, she had Can-Am boxes that she brought with her. And
Yeah, they had those on at the Black Friday event in Barrie.
oh, yeah, so you saw those are hers.
Okay.
And I guess they used to have a pump that had both fillers on it, and it just had like a, you would physically change where the mud was coming out of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I'm not sure why they stopped doing that. There's so many different companies on the market, though. I guess like it's I understand Colombia, like it's made here, yeah, it's family owned business, that kind of thing. I kind of understand where Mark's coming from, where it sounds like he touches everything before it goes out. Like he's dialing it in. There's a lot of like making sure everything's 1,000%. At least that's what it sounds like. I haven't had any back and forth with him. Um, but I mean, other than that, like there's like four other companies I know nothing about, and everything looks the same. Like to kind of throw your hat in that ring, that you're only going to get a percentage of the market share, anyways, right? So just focus on what you're good at. Maybe that Tape Pro sander, you've got that.
Yeah. Yeah. The Stealth Sander.
Yeah. So I just picked it up today. Steve has one. I used it just for like one sand day, and I really like it.
Yeah.
Like
Once it would be nice if the sanding pads had that like factory crease, so it's just great. It's like, just slap it on, it's done. But like once you get that crease kind of dialed in, it's nice. Now, when I got mine, I got it at CSR, and on their website, they only have lay down, buddy. They only have 220 grit available. Is that a
yes.
CSR thing, or is that's it? You could only get 220 grit for it.
So I think you can only get 220, and I'm going to say it because this is going to come out in a really long time from now, but they're doing their own sandpaper for it. It's coming out next week.
Okay,
So
I folded my Merca over it, and it worked great. So I was going to say you don't have to do fancy
yes,
sandpaper.
yeah, so they've got their own packaging. They're just like kind of doing the finishing touches on it right now. But it'll be 150 and 180, and then I think the 220 will be available through Tape Pro.
Sorry, we got a loose dog again. But yeah,
Oh,
that even with the 220, like it is really good.
yeah.
It would be nice to have a little bit more of an aggressive sanding paper.
Yeah, where you're not pushing on it, right? Like that's kind of one of the things that I've really come to terms with in the last month or two is like having the correct grit with a lot of finesse. Where it's like there's no need to be pushing on it. Just use the correct grit.
And that flusher ball connection. Let's see. Come on, stay. Once he gets loose, he gets into stuff. Come on, lay down.
Oh, that's good. That's yeah, I love dogs, man. I really miss having a dog.
There we go. With that flusher ball connection, like that sanding head has a lot of maneuverability on the pole itself. So
Yes.
I found that a lot more forgiveness than just like your standard, you know, whatever sanding pole where you're just doing one side of the corner at a time.
Yeah.
Now you have both sides with a little bit more maneuverability on it. Just literally saves about half the time. In theory, you'd think.
I
And even like doing it on a couple jobs, it's for rough sand between coats, it's phenomenal. And for final sand, you still have to do some detailing with a sponge afterwards, but it does the bulk of the work for you. And
yeah.
that's my biggest thing. Sanding is like do baby steps at a time. I merc everything, that's done. And then now I go through, I still sand all my corners, that's done. Then I'm going to do a light pole sanding over everything,
Hmm.
that's done. Now I'm just detailing. So when it comes down to detailing, there's next to nothing to do. I'm just walking around with the light and seeing um, any deficiencies that are left. Whereas, if you don't do all the steps when it comes, if you skip steps, then there's a lot more work to do with that sponge at the very end, and that's just no fun.
Totally. It is nice just to go through a room with a light and be like, there's nothing in here, or like it's just your three ways or whatever. And it's just there's those feelings of like I fucking just won that. Uh Having a sanding a room like that where there's like minimal stuff because you've done your due diligence up to it. It's one of my favorite feelings. I was like very careful using it for a couple of rooms, and then I was like, I wonder how quickly I could run through a room with it. And then when I went through and checked, you can really get moving. It's like running a flusher. um
Yeah.
I like getting that peak of it myself with the sandpaper, but how it when you run it the other way and it kind of flattens out the edges, that it's fantastic for that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some cases, most cases where like the only detailing, obviously the three ways, and then typically where my bevels will meet my angle, a little bit of detailing to do in there
Mhm.
afterwards with the spot. But the bulk of the angle, like like just your pure angle, nothing connecting to it. The Stealth Sander does 99% of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Sure.
excited to use it some more. Um, yeah, that's really neat. It's really fun to see new stuff show up that really works good.
Yeah.
Because I know there's like this constant influx of new things, and there has to be no innovation, right? But every once in a while, you're like, this is fucking awesome. Yeah, your work is fantastic, by the way. Like when I see it online, it's different, but when I came to site, I was like, this is fucking awesome. Um, and it doesn't sound like you're taking your time to make it look like that. It's just you're just good at it.
It's see like my thing is like there's certain things that I don't there's obviously aspects of the job that I don't enjoy doing. So I try to break it down in baby steps so that when it comes time to doing those things that I don't necessarily enjoy doing, it's like it's less. Kind of
Right.
like how I said with the detailing afterwards. You know, if you do all the baby steps in between, when you have your light and your sponge, there's not a lot left to do. So like my work, I try to break it down in like the most logical way where like I'm not tying into to wet mud. Like I try to break down my order of operations to make the most sense for me. Like for example, if when I'm coating, I like to do my beads first and then I'll do my screws. So my beads have a little bit of time to set up. So then when I run my bevels, I could take pull off my box where it pulls into the bevels, and that feathered edge, or sorry, when I'm running my bevels, the feathered edge of the beads is already dry, so my
Right.
tie off is minimal there. You know what I mean? Like those minor things, and like for me, like I'm pretty particular in like a lot of those things. So for me,
Mhm.
that just kind of came naturally, and a lot of times YouTube and Instagram, and just watching videos, asking questions, and a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, totally. That is kind of the most important is figuring out what works best for you, right? And what makes the most sense for you. Um, but like you said, when you're that strategic of like, we're going to do this first, because by the time I want to tie into it, this specific part will be dry. It gives you that like little bit of forgiveness. Yeah, for sure. Your butts, how are you doing your butt joints? It's all machine, right? Are you doing any troweling and
Yeah, it's like 95% machine. Like
yeah.
I'll tie in on my final coat, I'll tie in my butts to my bevels. Like I'll run my bevels, I'll run my machines on my butts, um, right in the center on my final coat,
Mhm.
and then I let that kind of tack up. So I have my bevels done, I have the center of my butt done. I let that tack up, and then I'll move on to something else, and then I'll come back and I'll coat on top of that center coat I did on my butt when it's dry enough because the overhanging trowel bar doesn't dig in, like the
Nice.
wheel doesn't leave a mark. So if
Okay.
you time it properly, you could do a coat in the middle of your butt, let that tack up a bit, and then coat both sides. So now it's entirely done by machine. Then you let that tack up. You do your three ways or something, and then I just tie in by hand where it meets the bevel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's brilliant. Um, do you
Now,
have
depending on the size of job, like for a
t-
small job,
totally?
I'm not gonna. I don't have enough time. Like by the time I do the rest of the work, it's not dry enough. But on a larger job, usually by the time I get through an entire house worth of butts or bevels, whatever that specific task, usually it's dry enough to go back to.
I so I got my first taste of what 10,000 board feet was um this last couple of months. And when you can run all your tapes, get that done, and if you've still got time, you can run a box after, uh, like even just on your flats because it's already dry. Like if you've got hours to put in, you can get a lot of shit done in a day. When you've got that size of a job, like when you're saying like a 5,000 board foot townhouse or something, but you'll pick up two of them, or whatever you're doing, where you've got a lot of board feet. Yeah, if you start playing with like what's going to dry first and how can I get back to it today, you can get a lot done.
I've even messed around with not actually doing it, but like just in my head, kind of trying to figure out a way to say if I could get a whole five unit townhouse, you
Ooh.
know. So the first week it's about a day each to tape a unit, and then the next day or whatever the next week now I'm on first coat. So maybe I could do first coat on two or three of the units, or maybe I just go through, I first coat all the bevels and all five, and if I could break down the steps and just do all of those steps in all five units, feel like you could probably kind of save some time in terms of like, what I mean, like taking on one unit in a week and doing, first coat, second coat, third coat, sand, and on to the next one. If you break down five units each task strategically, I feel like you could make a lot more profit in a
Yeah.
lot less time doing it that way. But I still have some logistics to work out, and I need to find a whole townhouse unit that could take a
You,
month to finish.
I was gonna say that it sounds like that's the biggest thing when you're getting into townhouses and like cookie cutter smaller stuff, is the fucking time. Like they want it back in 5 days, and so that's kind of tough. I also kind of played around with the idea of taking it from back framing to ready for paint, because I've got all of that skill set. Like if anything, my taping is what's lacking. So framing and boarding, no problem, right? So would that be good or bad to a builder? So at some point here, I'm going to go in and start talking to builders and just see what makes the most sense for everybody. Because if you're kind of losing out a little bit on your taping, like money per board foot, like what are they paying the back framer? And like, is he making a decent amount? Because if he is, then you could take on the back framing, then board it, then tape it. And then how much time would you give me to do that? I'm kind of wandering down that path a little bit.
Yeah. So, like, from my understanding, at least for the people I work for, it sounds like the builder will take on a drywall contractor. That
Hmm.
drywall contractor, he could take on volume, right? So he has however many employees, and he's going to sub out the rest. So, like, this drywall contractor, he'll take on an entire subdivision for that builder,
Right.
whereas going in as just yourself to that builder or myself to that builder, it's like that middleman, that contractor, he could take on the entire unit and he subs it out, and that's how I get the work. So
Right.
it would be nice to get in directly to the builder, cut out that middleman, but you can only do so much as one person. You can't do
Right.
the volume that the middleman could offer.
Yeah. And I mean, if something goes wrong with you, it's different where if it's a big contractor, he's just got someone different there tomorrow. Or it's,
Yeah,
yeah, I see where that's attractive. I never thought about that. So I did corrections for big sites where they were like 300 houses, and the framing company I worked for, that's what they did, where they would pick up like 300 houses, and then they would frame them in little blocks, right? But I never thought about the drywallers. They would, yeah, I guess that would make tons of sense that you would just have guys that specifically do that, because you would get pretty quick at like understanding the layout of a house and like what makes the most sense. And then there's like 100 of them.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. Like I've done. Usually, that kind of work is kind of filling in the gaps for me.
Yeah.
Like my ideal job is kind of a hang and tape,
Yeah.
supply hang and tape renovation job, basement, kitchen, whatever. Um, that those jobs are the most enjoyable and the most profitable for me.
Hmm.
Um, so I have kind of a network of contractors that I could get one or two jobs every month, every few months, sort of thing. Um, and usually those jobs will take a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on the size and scope. So I try to prioritize those jobs and then fill in the gaps with those townhouse jobs, because with the people that I was fortunate enough to meet working in the trades prior to starting my own business, like I could I could call this guy today and he could probably get me in a unit tomorrow or on Monday, sort of thing.
That's
Um,
brilliant.
just because of the volume that I have. So might not be the best job out there, but it's work,
Yeah, you're
and
still
it's
working. Yeah.
9 times out of 10, it's quality board work, and it's clean site conditions and whatnot. So I'm
I've
very fortunate enough to have kind of that as a backup, and then focus on the hanging and taping for the main.
the stuff you really like. Yeah. I that's another. I love framing, boarding, and taping basements, like going through the whole process, because you're not doing the same thing every day. Everything's bang on the whole way across. But typically you have to take on the whole site, and the fucking headaches that come with that. It ruins all the fun that you could have been having.
Yeah.
Like you get halfway through framing, and then somebody finally sees it and goes, "Oh, can we change that?" Like, okay, but then we got to talk about money, and it's money's always a funny thing with some customers, where it's like, we can do whatever you want, but you've not paid for that. So how do we get to a point where you're not upset and I'm not taking a bath on the project? Having people call you all the time, or you sub it out and they don't show up, or like I really do enjoy showing up with my tools, working, and at the end of the day you just go home. It's that's been a lot of fun. But I kind of do miss doing the full thing too, right? I feel like maybe you're just never happy, and that's just what it is. You just find the joy in each day, and try your best.
I feel like every now and again I'll just get like a sense of deja vu of like looking back at a certain moment in my life and kind of be like, oh man, like whatever. Looking back 2 years ago, whatever I was doing, looking back, like, oh, that was great. And then remembering like 2 years ago, thinking like that same kind of thing, like where you're thinking about the next thing, or like you're just not. Maybe that is just how we're wired.
Yeah, and it's nice to remember too. Like I mean, if you don't hate everything, it is kind of easy to look back fondly on things. Like I miss being in a big group setting where you've got five guys all working together, like, and you're in like a team setting. Because there's a lot of fun that goes along with that kind of stuff. Uh, but I mean, I guess you can look at everything the same, where there's a lot of bullshit that comes with certain things too, right? And maybe that's why you ended up moving on, or whatever. I hear whispers about these like townhouse sites where it's like uh the materials all there, the cleanup's done by somebody else. Like it all of the thinking and all of the like laboring work is done. And you just like show up, tape, go home. It,
For the one builder I worked for in KW, that is exactly it. Like I show up, there's no scraps, the floor swept, the materials in the center of the room. I show up with my tools and put mud on the walls and ceiling, and leave all the garbage, leave all the slops, everything. It's a disaster. Well, not a disaster, but it's a mess. And that's the cleanup is not part of your scope. So like I'll be respectful. Like I'll break down my boxes, and I'm not like leaving like bags of wet bags of mud all over the place. Like I
yeah,
have a garbage box. I break down boxes. Be respectful, but like you don't have to scrape the floor. You don't have to sweep up at the end of the day. Nothing. Like it's
yeah,
just you do your work. You do your job, and you leave. And with those jobs, there's no occupancy. So as long as you have work lights, you could pretty much work 24 hours a day if you like to do that, or work late on certain days if you have to. But on that, with that aspect, it is nice. But again, the lowest profit, or lowest earned per foot
hmm
on jobs like that. But that's because you have the least amount of work to do on a job like
I'm kind of excited for when that takes a little bit of a turn though. Um, because like a lot of these townhouses are like $1 million townhouses, and they're still kind of paying next to nothing for the board and the tape. But eventually, in the next 10 or 15 years, there's just going to be nobody that's any good at that stuff. So I'm assuming, unless you're going to have like a small army of people that kind of know what they're doing, To have somebody come in and do a good job for something, that there's got to be some sort of a spike in that pay at some point, because you're not going to have that like explosive growth that they're looking for if nobody can do the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
um
I'm very grateful to have found a passion for finishing, like,
yeah,
finding my little niche where something that I enjoy doing, passionate about the tools, the process, and it's in demand and it's very well paying. Like,
yeah,
just checks all the boxes for me.
yeah. And so we have a friend, actually the people that I went to dinner with tonight, his dad has a cottage up north, a little further than Muskoka. And he's saying that people are losing their oh, what the hell is it called? Not contracts, but permits, because they can't find people to build the houses. So they're taking like enormous sums of money to pay people to build it, because they've been waiting how long to get all their permits to go through, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's already kind of happening in what I would consider like a high-end community. Um yeah, it's a little bit crazy. I'm really wondering where it's going to go. There is this like enormous influx of women in the trades, which I think is going to try and balance things out a little bit, or at least you'll
Yeah,
have like twice as many competent people, hopefully. Like some of the men you'd see these days are fucking disasters. But I think it's all across the board. Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting anyways to see where that kind of stuff goes, because I really enjoy finishing. Like that contract work paid so much money. But I wasn't happy. Like I'm not, I'm so giddy running boxes and like running the auto taper. So much fun.
yeah.
Top angles at 10 feet sucks, but I mean, the rest of it's fun. It's, and I don't know, cleanup's easy. It's you can blast your music. There's no customers typically around when you're doing bigger stuff, or like you're saying, no occupancy at all. So you can kind of be there whenever you want. Yeah, I really do enjoy it. Um, I'm gonna take in a look into Venetian a little bit, I think. For how much I'm really enjoying fresco. I want to wrap my head around what Venetian is and what the difference is, because I really like that glass look that you kind of get from it. Like some of it they buff up nice, and it's got that like real
Yeah.
sheen to it.
I didn't even know what it was. I think like last year, Drywall Nation, or I think maybe it was Ben M, or maybe it was some sort of collaboration on a project. But I think the two of them did a pretty cool project where it had like a very like glass sheen type marble finish ceiling with a sort of like, I don't know, some reverse globe kind of dome in the ceiling.
Yeah, I think
Um,
this was up in Sudbury, right? Like this was like almost
Possibly.
last year at this point.
This was
Yeah,
pretty recent. Yeah, that was my first introduction to it, so I didn't even know what it
same.
was.
I didn't, and I didn't even pick up that it was Venetian, to be honest, until I started talking to Nick. I had no idea what it was. When I heard plaster, I thought of like lath and plaster, and that sucks. Like don't do that anymore. But yeah, it sounds like it's like specific minerals that are mixed with water and whatever. So and that's what I mean. I almost sound foolish trying to talk about it, but I'd really like to wrap my head around it.
So
And
sorry,
sorry.
when I was doing my samples, I was working on a job, and I was pre-filling for the job, so I had Durabond 90 out, and I had some excess, and I didn't want to whatever. All my pre-fill was done, so I had a scrap board, so I just kind of did like a rough first coat, how you would in fresco with Durabond 90,
Yeah.
and let it dry, and then had some leftover mud at the end of the day. So did a tight skim over top of that, like you would your second coat of fresco, and just to see how that turned out. And I didn't keep it. It was just ended up going in the garbage, but it was pretty cool. I didn't put
Yeah.
any finishing on it or anything like that, but just like the natural contrast between like kind of the grayer Durabond 90 when it's dry versus like the lighter mud. So like the, thinking about like the Venetian plaster where you're pretty much getting that marbling effect with just the dry mix and water, right? And different dyes, I would assume. I don't
That's
know
kind
the
of
process exactly, but
that's kind of what I get from it, where so I know Venetian's done like this, where you got a couple of different colors and you layer them on top of each other, and that gives you a certain thing. But then it looks like I follow Exotic. He seems to be pretty cool in some of the stuff that he's doing. And it like even just one color to one color, it's how many times it's been overlapped on itself. Like I think you're right, where they're just it's just layers and layers. But I don't know. At the end of that, I don't think there's any texture on the wall though. I think it's flat. Like I think that's what the burnishing does is you're making the whole wall flat after you've kind of like applied it all over the place in little swoops. Um yeah, it's gonna be neat. They've got a class. It's like $1,600 though. I'm not doing that. I think I'll just pick it up and waste a bucket figuring it out, you know? Like there's got to be stuff on YouTube. We'll get a couple of
I
us
feel,
together.
I feel like there's a definite art form to that where like there's your true craftsman that could just go into a house and make that
Yes.
house immaculate. But it's like anything in the trades where like your true craftsman, your true professional framing.
Yep.
Frame a house. It's plumb. It's level. It's square. It's true. It's good. Or anybody could just slap 2x4s together and in the shape of a house sort of thing. So for any sort of like whatever trade in the trades, finishing, framing, anything, or Venetian plaster, like I feel like there's going to be like the old school methods, but the old school people that like are those professionals that could just do it immaculately, and then there's the people that you can pick up a video on YouTube and you could pick it up and you could do it, but there's a fine line between
It's not the
that
same.
and what's the real
Yeah.
true professional doing that.
That's the
So
I
it was cool to see.
yeah, I want to get ahead of the wave on some of this stuff because the guys that are really good at certain things do not have the patience for this new work ethic that's out, right? Like I don't even think they're trying to teach anyone anymore unless you're paying for it. It's I don't want to do this or that's too much work or whatever. I can't imagine they have any sort of patience for that shit at all.
Yeah,
If you got somebody that I said once, nobody's hungry or nobody's been hungry anymore. And I don't mean like hungry like for money, but I mean like didn't have food around, you know? And I don't think my parents' generation, but their parents' generation, I think there was a lot of that. And I think there was a lot of like take your kids to work day and swat at them when they're not doing a good job, and those are the guys that are now going to start retiring in like the next 10 years. So it's I just don't want to see things lost, right? Like what you're talking about, the pristine what it actually is, not like, YouTubing it and taking a look at it. Yeah.
yeah. I
We've got
mean,
to
don't
oh
get me
wait.
wrong. That method of YouTube, like that's kind of my way of getting into the trade. So there's
Oh,
nothing
totally.
there's nothing against picking up a YouTube video and doing whatever. But yeah, like I would love the opportunity to work with a taper, an old taper, that
Yeah.
hopefully uses machines because that's what I'm going to use regardless of what they do. But like someone's who's been using the machines for 20 years, that's
Yeah.
seen it all, done it all, and just I would love to work with them on a job and see their process and not copy it, but take from what they do, match it to what I do,
Yeah.
modify my work to kind of take bits and pieces.
Yeah.
That's how I learn is basically work with somebody, take bits and pieces, what works in my process and what doesn't, and
Hmm.
then
And bridge the gaps kind of, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Like Royce from the three-way, he's a machine taper and he's fast. I've not worked with him, I've not seen him work, but he's got a couple of sons and I've talked to them, and it would be great to be on a site with him, just to see, because that's essentially exactly what you're talking about. It's somebody that's been doing it for 50 years, and has just kind of figured out all the kinks. Now you can't kind of cookie cutter somebody's style like that because it's not your own, but like you said, you could pick up on little things here and there or whatever. We got about 4 minutes left. Are you gonna come back for another one?
I'm down if you're down.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, then we won't rush off. Yeah, that's it's exciting stuff, man. I kind of fell back in love with finishing when I figured out about the tools. And then now that I've kind of like really dove back into the scene, this like textured walls, doing different types of things on the ceiling, incorporating sprayers, like these are all things that are brand new to me and it's so exciting. I really am enjoying the adventure, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like for me personally, like I kind of branched off of my own, just specifically drywall,
Hmm.
but there's still new things every day. Like whether it's just a tape job, like unless I'm doing a cookie cutter townhouse complex, like every job is going to be laid out differently. Or if I'm doing a lot of whatever, a lot of the same kind of hang and tape jobs, like there's other options I could go in terms of work. I could try to
Oh,
scope out one
totally.
of those cool custom trimless shadow bead houses, or try to scope out maybe a fresco job or something like that. Like there's so many
Hmm.
different avenues that I could take, and like I have the freedom of taking versus being an employee for somebody and kind of showing up in the morning and being sent off to do whatever they want me to do. I'd rather do what I wanted.
Yeah, and it's still under the umbrella of your profession. That's kind of what I enjoy about it is you're still doing what you're doing. It's just a little different, a little more exciting here and there. And when it's not, you do something else that's under that umbrella. Yeah, I really like that. All right, that's a good time to take another break here.